Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the garage for another edition of the Sunday show with Andy the Gabby Cabby. Glad to see you all here in our usual place, and I can't believe there's something like 144 people watching already before I've even got started. I'm very much looking forward to this one, as I'm sure all you are. As the title infers, I've got Graham Moore, the leader of the English Constitution Party and the chairman of the English Constitution Society, waiting in the wings. So without further ado, let's get him on and let's get this show on the road. Hello, Graham.
Hello. Thank you, Andy, for having me on your channel.
You're very welcome, and welcome to the garage. You made it. You've even brought your books with you.
Well, I have indeed, and I'm trying to get into this garage, and they don't want it.
I wonder why that might be. Before we get cracking, there's a story to tell about the background of this live stream. I spoke to Graham by phone. I think it was about a week ago now, and we live a lot closer to each other than we realised. And we were going to set up this skit where I was going to pick him up as a passenger, and we were going to have a chat and a chinwag in the back of my car. But the bloody thing ended up with an oil leak. Didn't want to play ball, so we've had to resort to Plan B, which is a good old garage. But we got there in the end. Well, Graham, I'm looking at the comments, and there's many people in there saying I'm British, not English. Sorry, the other way around. I'm English, not British. I speak English and all the rest of it. So many people are in there already that know the score. But for anybody that doesn't, who are you? Why are you doing this? And what's it all about?
So my name's Graham Moore. I am, as you already announced, the leader of the English Constitution Party, which is the political element to what we do, and it's very strategic, right? Anyone can stand for us, just to make sure everyone understands what the English Constitution Party is. It is a brand, and that brand is England and freedom, and our manifesto is the English Constitution. Right. I had a big fight with the Electoral Commission, nearly went to the High Court, and they decided to register us because there was no law to say that I couldn't use the law in my manifesto, right, or our manifesto. And then the other element to us is the English Constitution Society, which is the educational seminars. That's where we go out with all the banners, and then we talk to people. Sometimes hundreds of people attend, and we talk through the Constitution. And then at the beginning of the seminar, I ask people whether they are British or English. And invariably, you get something like half and half. We'll say British and English. And then at the end of the seminar, you normally get 2 or 3 diehards who say British or they're foreign. And then the rest of the audience all say English. So even with an hour's tuition on England, people completely get it. And that's one of the reasons why the state have been banning me from their public buildings with my seminars.
Right. I mean, it's interesting, and you're well aware of the polls that I've put on my own channel and my own social media, asking people what they consider to be their national identity. And it's very interesting, the results. I mean, I'm a child of the 70s. I was born in the late 70s. So when my education took place, well, the early 80s up to the mid 90s, I suppose, it was Britishness. It was British. It was, everything involving it. And this idea of, hang on, I'm actually English, not British, didn't really factor into it. And Christ knows what they're teaching our kids today, rolling back all these generations. So something definitely stopped somewhere back in time. Where do you think this happened? Where do you think this split happened? Where England and English, I suppose, got hard done by, pushed to one side, and it's British. Well, what do you think? What went wrong and when?
Oh, well, there's a number of things that went wrong. I mean, we've reverse engineered what they've done. And I could, if you want me to go through that briefly, I can go through the whole thing. But you're pinpointing something that is pretty crucial, and that is removing the English Constitution and English history, but specifically the Constitution, which is your rights, which technically is unlawful because it says in the Acts of Union you must communicate these rights to the people, right? So that happened in the early 1970s, and the reason it did is because they went into the European, the common market, but they always knew exactly what it was because there was a plan. There was a 5 presidents plan, and it stayed the same. It's still the same today. If you go and read it, it's exactly the same. And it was put to Ted Heath, and it was also put to Parliament that it was an attack on the sovereignty of our nation. And when I say our nation, I mean England, because the union technically is not a nation; it's a political union. Yeah. And what happened in 1972? They created something called the European Communities Act of 1972, because people who knew the Constitution, and especially the English Bill of Rights, they said, "Hang on a minute, there is a supremacy clause in our Constitution. You can't do this," right? And then, as an afterthought, in 1975, right? So they've already enacted this law, which is null and void, by the way. Under our Constitution, it is null and void. What they did was they did a very crooked referendum. And if some people remember that, Enoch Pyle was one of the people that was saying live on the BBC at the time, they'll learn, and we did. They would never give us another referendum to come out until 2016, and the reason was because they knew that we knew what was going on. So what they actually did was remove the Constitution from the curriculum. Everyone was taught prior to 1970 in what they call like sort of normal comprehensive schools. They was taught it, but they carried on to be taught the Constitution. It was called civics lessons in grammar schools, right? So that the more intelligent working class, if you want to look at it that way, was still taught the Constitution for a little while longer. But here's the kicker. They removed it from the bar exams and they removed it from the solicitors' exams. So therefore, the layers of judiciary and now King's Counsel have never been trained in any depth on the Constitution of England. And that was so they could take complete control, roll out what's known as the EU regions. So they're dividing England into 9 regions. And I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. If anyone ever says to you, stronger together, you must remind them that was a Soviet Union slogan. It is a Marxist slogan, right? And no one can deny that dividing England into regions, right, is division and division of my nation. And that's one of the strongest things that we fight against. But in a nutshell, that's the most serious thing. If you take it back to when the most serious problems so initially, although the Acts of Union was actually brought in to start to nullify some of our rights, even in 1706, 1707, the real issue started, believe it or not, just after we won the war against Napoleon. And a certain banking family had in effect defrauded the London Stock Exchange by presenting a rumour that we had lost, knowing it to be untrue. They'd already got a carrier pigeon come back to them and said that we'd won. So all the stocks went down, and a certain family bought all them stocks and virtually owned the country after that. That's when the serious issues really started, and especially when we got to 1857, and they changed 2 of the Christian oaths and allowed any form of oath, and that was completely unconstitutional. And the first person after that happened, that was I'll just mention one of them rather than the second one, but one of them was called the Oaths Act. Now, and why it's really important is because once that had happened, the first member of parliament who was lobbying for this to happen, he wasn't a member of parliament, and then he became a member of parliament, and his name was Rothschild.
Right.
So, and then from there, it got worse, a lot worse. The real attacks started just after that. Just after that, in 1868, they repealed ultra vires illegally Section 3 of the original Bill of Rights, which is why no one ever sees it. I've got copies of it, and we've got copies of it. And then people should realise that the English Bill of Rights protected our old charters, going all the way back to the Charter of Liberties. In other words, all of that was still valid in our law, and this group of people deleted that by stealth, I may add, right? So they never told anyone what they was doing, and that all come after. There was a build-up to it, but the working class, they'd expanded the franchise of voting to the working class, and they needed a way of nullifying us, and that's why they started removing our rights. And what the working class don't realise is the biggest group of people that assisted in that is the Labour Party, because they was created by another group called the Fabian Society.
Right. Yeah, I heard you say that.
It's not. There are other things. The 1911 Parliament Act, for example, we was warned at the time by very clever people that if you allow this act to go through and to pass, you will be creating a political class, and at your peril. And that's the first time we started paying members of parliament. And of course, now they're on, 87, 90,000 pound a year, 250,000 pound a year expenses. I've sent things out showing people don't realise that Sinn Féin, right? So think of Sinn Féin. And by the way, Sinn Féin was one of the groups that pushed through the 1911 Parliament Act. Sinn Féin is now paid £250,000 a year by the English taxpayer, because it's mainly our taxes. All the other add-ons are not a net benefit to us at all. And they're paying them £250,000 a year. The SNP, Scottish National Party, get 1.3 million a year. That's to run their parties. Right? We get nothing. We're pushed away because they don't want the English to take back control of England and in English Parliament, which we would return England to the people. So, and Plaid Cymru, they get 125 grand a year. So when you start to think, all of these, the national parties that are out there do not really want, and anyone listening to this will understand. Let's just think about Sinn Féin. They want independence for Ireland, but they want to join the EU. The SNP wants independence for Scotland, but it wants to join the EU. That's not independence. That means you're transferring one union to another. And then what you actually see in the background is they're drawing away the patriots from the real cause. And that's why the English Constitution Party, our number one principle is self-determination. And we stand for, we are a captured nation of the British Empire. And we want real freedom, real liberty for the Scots, the English, the Irish, the Welsh, and the Cornish. If the Cornish want self-determination, it is for the people to decide. It is not for someone to impose some form of authority above them. Because that's not what we believe. We believe we are all independent people.
I think that's where it's kind of the waters have muddied a little over the years, because you hear things like sovereign parliament and they represent us and all of this. And I've seen text where it quite clearly says that we have the right to self-govern, govern ourselves, but millions of us all over the country can't make all the decisions all the time. So we nominate a representative to represent us, the power of the people power, our decisions. And it's gone, hasn't it? It's completely and utterly skewed to what it should be.
Well, I'm glad you've brought that up, because that's one of my pet subjects. Well, there's a lot of pet subjects that relate back to the English Bill of Rights, which, remember, everyone should understand this. It came from a convention parliament, right? It's crucial people get that. And a convention parliament isn't an ordinary parliament. It's when we didn't have a king. The power went back to the people, right? So, and the people decided from the original contract, which was the Declaration of Rights, that's known as private law, and you have what's known as private right injury. So you can claim a tort against the state if they go against anything that's in the Declaration of Rights. And the Bill of Rights is what's known as public law, which is a public injunction, a criminal injunction against the state, the police, any operator of the state going against your rights. It's a public injunction. And that's why it's called public law. So you've got belt and braces that our ancestors put in place for us, and it's been under attack since just after Waterloo. There are other reasons for it as well. The British, don't forget, England's been a country for 1,100 years, right? The British have only been a thing for 300. We've just over 300 years. And within 70 years of becoming a British Parliament, they attacked the English colonies in America, right? 1776 was because of the liberties they were taking. And people don't realise, prior to that, 1776, there was something called the Bacon Rebellion in 1676, 100 years before. And if you read the history of that, you're like, wow, these people really were nasty. They meant business. And it was the cabal, the regime, the ruling classes trying to control working people that left England mainly, right? Went to America and built a new life where they said, we're not abiding by your rules and your silliness and your pressure and oppression. We want to bring up our families in liberty and freedom. And the American Constitution obviously come from England. It's not British. There's no such thing as a British Constitution. There never has been. There's no such thing as British law, technically. So again, when you talk about Parliament, they say that Parliament is sovereign. And one of the reasons that triggered that was that in 1947, 2 years after the Second World War, when we'd fought for our country, they ultravires again deleted the top and bottom part of Section 2 of the original Bill of Rights, which told everyone Parliament is not sovereign. Right? You cannot touch this. And in the Bill of Rights, it states in 3 places forever, and in 1 place all time to come. And it was a solemn agreement. In other words, it was agreement made and the oath was taken to God. Right? So on Easter Sunday, it is a really, really sensitive thing to talk about, that our king has perjured his oath. Right. And the reason he's perjured his oath is because, and by the way, technically that means he's abdicated. How do I know that? Because I've read it in law, what Lord John Somers, who was the Lord Keeper of the Great Seal of England, he was also the Attorney General. He was also a Solicitor General. He was one of the greatest legal minds, and he was the framer, along with Sir John Holt, who was the Lord Chief Justice of the English Bill of Rights. Now, I'm just saying to people, I've read most of what they've written, and I can tell you that when you have something called a 3-line whip, the reason they created a 3-line whip as a code system, right? So if you go against the 3-line whip, you're kicked out of the party. If you vote for any political party that has a whip, you are voting to be whipped. You are voting for a group of people, right? And you're already seeing that with reform, that have to do as they're told. Well, the Bill of Rights says you cannot interfere with the will of Parliament and the people's representatives. And that's exactly what they're doing, right? So we don't have any whips for that reason, because it is unconstitutional. You're there to represent the people, air their grievances to the Crown and to Parliament. So what you've just said there, just to give you a quick example of that, Parliament cannot be sovereign. If you go onto the Supreme Court's website, it actually, by the way, that's illegal, the Supreme Court. If you go onto the Supreme Court's website, it actually tells you that there is a separation of power. And then people don't realise that if the king doesn't assent, so if he stood his ground and says, I do not assent to this law, then it's not law. So how can Parliament be sovereign? Right?
Yeah.
If they had passed the law, and there is something, which there often is, by the way, it's just that the judiciary is corrupt as the politicians. The judiciary can strike down even primary law. By the way, it says that in the English Bill of Rights, right? And again, from the common law, Sir Edward Coke in the Bonham case of 1610, Dr. Bonham, and Sir Edward Coke stated clearly, right, that the common law will control statute if it is abhorrent, or what the words he used was repugnant. So if they create, and by the way, it was always known, I've got a cheat sheet here, or a 1952 original exam cram for barristers, right? And in there it clearly states, if Parliament was to make a law that creates rebellion by the people, if it creates rebellion, then that law is null and void, right? Because you're not allowed to create laws that create rebellion. It goes against the king's peace. So once you understand all this, you understand that Parliament is not sovereign. They're conning people. They've conned people for a long time. And to be fair, when you look at the situation, right, what would you rather have? A despotic king, and there's just one of them, you get rid of him, right? And this current king has perjured his oath and therefore abdicated, right? Or try and get rid of 650, including the civil service that actually run the show, the non-elected bureaucracy. So how do you get rid of it? There's only one way, and that's to void the Acts of Union. And we are unique as England, as a nation, just as Russia was, right? Because this happened with Russia. They had a political union called the USSR. In 1991, they dissolved the union. It went back to being Russia. And they went back to being a Commonwealth, right? So England resets our laws, not our technology, not the way we're actually, walking about in normal daily life, as the lefties would try and put it here. We wouldn't go back to horse and carts, although I wouldn't mind that, to be honest. I can just see you driving one of the old carriages.
I wouldn't know
with a top hat on. So
while to get the Gatwick.
That's it. So the real answer is that the only way that you can go back and stop it and take back England, like completely cutting out cancer, is literally, we are unique as a nation, being 1,100 years old, to say we can stop all this. And here's the benefit, people. You would go back. Most people don't realise that we Anglicised America, not the other way around, right? And America, in the independent United States of America, so they're independent states, they have, each one of their states has its own Supreme Court, has its own court system, etc., and they can make their own laws. Where did they get that from? England. That's what we used to. That's what we did. So you would go back to being Norfolk, you would go back to being Yorkshire, you would be going back to being Cheshire, and the people would then elect their people to be in them positions. You could go back to, electing judges, electing. I'll give you an example. In America, they have sheriffs. Where did sheriffs come from? Where did the governors come from? The state, right? It all come from England. The sheriffs come from England. Everything come from England. The bailiffs come from England. The bondsmen come from England, right? And America adopted the common law jurisdiction. And to this day in the Supreme Court, even though it's been packed with some bad people at the moment, they refer back to the English common law and the jurisdiction of England, and they look at the law as the English presented it, included Sir Edward Coke. So once people understand there is a reset position, and it is only the British, by the way, who are a minority, 19% of the population, that's all, right? And half of them are foreigners. So people also should understand that in our parliament currently, you cannot be a member of parliament, you cannot be a lord, you cannot be a judge, you cannot have any position of power, including a police constable, in any position if your parents were not, parents, plural, were not English. So you have to be born of English parents, right? So that doesn't mean someone who is black and has been here 200 years and they may have not been in any way with white people. They've kept because they love being black. They want to stay black, right? And I ain't got a problem with that, right? Muhammad Ali even said that, right? So when I look at them things, their children could be elected because they're English. And if they're culturally English and in particular England is Protestant, right? So I would turn, if when we go back, and we will, it's not about an if, it's a when, and we will be doing this because everyone's had enough. We will be a non-secular nation. So we will go back to being a Christian nation. And then everyone will say, wow, right? And then again, there's places and things that you can do where you can deal with all the problems that we've got.
Right. Couple of points come out of this. You mentioned the war. Now, one of my hobbies, I love reading war history. I'm always delving into books and all sorts. And I was looking up about the old German Kriegsmarine within the last couple of days, and was reading about Karl Donitz. I won't go into full detail, but he was a Grand Admiral in the German Navy during the war. And we officially declared war against Germany on the 1st of September 1939, I think it was, from memory. And an off-the-cuff comment that Karl Donitz came out with was, oh, great, another war with England. Not Britain, England. And that really stood out to me. And I thought, well, that was the understanding at the time. And you talk about America and talk about where they got their laws and their constitution and everything from, and how the states deal with their business. So, it's come from us. And you have Keir Starmer crawling up the rear end of the European Union on near a daily basis. So surely it would follow that aren't we better off being friends with the states than the European Union? What do you have to say about that? Because surely we have more in common with America than we do those in Europe.
Well, I am so pleased you said that. I was asked a list of questions from Northwest Times, right? And it's on their website if you go and look it up, Northwest Times. And they asked me to reply succinctly to this 10 questions. And I did within a day. Bearing in mind the campaign is quite busy. And they edited my replies, all right? And so I, on Twitter, put out the full replies. And one of the replies was about, they said, who would you rather be with, the European Union or the USA? And I said, the USA. I said, the USA is our natural ally. And there is a special relationship with the United States of America, right? And that special relationship is between England and America, not the British. The British have always attacked and seek to attack America, right? Whereas the English ain't. They're like our cousins, our brothers and sisters. They're like family, right? And I know a lot of Americans have done conferences in Texas and taught people out there about the English constitutional law, and they was like literally wow, right? We love this because Texas, when it became independent in 1836, adopted the English Constitution and the English common law as part of its state constitution, right? If you go over to Texas in particular, they wear Stetsons, and I've got one here, and I've got cowboy boots here. I've got all sorts because I go out there and I love it out there, right? But and also I'm a class 1 marksman, right? So it's the only time I get to shoot is when I go over there. And just everyone needs to understand that Texas is under attack because of its strong allegiance to English law, because that's what is under attack, the common law, right? So, and once people understand that, so if I explain something to people like this, right, we talk about America and Americans, right? Really and truthfully, they're American externally because you think they all talk the same. They don't. They've got different accents, just like we have, right? And if you go to Texas, they're Texans. If you go to Florida, they're Floridians, right? If you go to Ohio, they're Ohioans. And all the states have got their own identity, right? The same as England. And again, when I was talking over there, people really understood it, right? And I mean, I won't go into detail about me talking about the Yankees, but the president of Texas, Daniel Miller, if you ever want him on your show, contact me and I'll get him on there. He's a fantastic guy. At the end of it, I got a standing ovation from hundreds of people. There was about 2,000 people at the conference. And he actually said, "Do you know how to wind up a Texan?" because I was just telling it as it was, right? Yeah. And they said, "That's exactly what we want." So let me just emphasize one other thing, because that question was asked of President Trump on my Twitter account. You'll see it at the G7 summit. The BBC, in a press conference, asked President Trump in his first term, who would you rather do business with? Who is your best ally and business partner? European Union or Great Britain? And do you know what President Trump said?
Go on.
England.
England.
No one mentions England anymore. Why is that? What happened to England? Right? And that's when I knew he was with us. Right?
Yeah.
Because and the press, there was a frenzy attacking him, right? Because he'd said the word England, right? And he basically said, the people that we are associated with are the English, right? And again, as soon as he did that, I knew that. And again, he's a Protestant, he's a Presbyterian, right? So he's not a Catholic, and I'm not having a go at Catholics. I was married to a Catholic for 33 years, but there is an issue with Jesuits. Jesuits start civil wars, right? And they're related to the Roman Empire in the way that they operate. And once people understand that President Trump gets it, we've wrote 2 letters to President Trump now. There's something in America in July. It's called that you can get something called captured nation status. And we wrote to the president's office and said, we need you to declare England as a captured nation. And I believe they're considering it.
Okay. Fingers crossed.
Well, they published a letter of mine about 5 years ago on the White House website. And everyone went, "Wow, we can't believe they've done that." And I said, "You need to keep trying. You need to explain to people that England doesn't want this. We want our country back."
Yeah, definitely. Well, everyone, we've got nearly 1,000 people in the house this evening. 993 at the moment. A couple on Facebook. I think there's some on X as well. There bloody well should be, because there usually is. Yeah, which tipped over 1,000. Thank you, everybody. If you haven't done so already, give the thumbs up a hit, because important live streams like this, it helps spread it around YouTube. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. What I want to do just very quickly is knock off a few of these comments that have been left. And then I want to talk a little bit about where you're standing and you know what power people actually have with regard to the vote, like consenting. But that's a little hint about that. Right, Kevin J. Ripley, the Constitution is the solution. Well, based on the last 35 minutes of talking, it bloody well is. You can hear that. Is this you, Graham?
Sharing is caring. That is me. Yeah. So don't forget, everyone out there, don't forget to share. So share it again, because new people see it, and this is YouTube. So you just keep pushing it out there, and more people are coming and listen.
Absolutely. Sharing is caring. Everybody's on social media now, so, you know, use it. Just share it with your friends, get your friends to share it with their friends, and get it out there. Austin Barrett, this man knows what he's talking about. Well, you've been on this for about 30 years, haven't you?
I have indeed. The worst thing they could have done, so I always tell people this, they stitched me up and sent me to prison as a Category A prisoner in Belmarsh. And just to give you, I'm in Category A, the highest level, for an alleged fraud, right? The whole thing was nonsense from start to finish. But I want people to know this. Instead of attacking people and attacking, you know, the people in the streets because it wasn't their fault, what I'd done was sat in a cell and read the law books. And my cell became like a barrister's library. And from that, I ordered a number of books to come in from the outside. One of them was a book called Prison Law by Simon Crichton, who was a solicitor at the time. I think he's still out there now. And I started to read through the law. We was banged up 23 and a half hours a day, being strip searched all the time, cell spins all the time. It was basically torture. So what I did was spoke to the other prisoners out the windows and said, listen, I've gone all through the law books. They're not allowed to do this to us, but I need your help. Now, Category A prisoners are, one of the reasons why they're Category A is because they're clever, right? And they went, what do you need us to do? I said, in the morning, go down and get a request and complaint form. So the next morning, for example, on one of these mornings, there were 25. So they'd never had a request and complaint form, which was part of the prep process, never had one of these forms put into them. Next morning, they got 25 of them. I told everyone what to write on the form, sign it and give it in the next morning, right? They give in the request and complaint forms the next morning. Next thing you know, the wing governor was there saying, what's the problem, right? And then I become a spokesman. Within 3 months, we was out on association, we was getting exercise, we was going to the gym, our food had improved, and then the prisoners had respect for me. But what I'm trying to explain to people is, instead of knocking out prison officers and kicking doors and banging cells, I put my head into the law and said, how can I change it, right? And imagine this, that a group of 30 prisoners can change their mistreatment by looking at the constitution of the prison. Well, if you transfer that from the prison system to the outside system and say, this is our constitution, and we need to come together to enforce the constitution on the people that are betraying us, then we can change what's going on at the moment. But again, people don't understand because it's been removed from their psyche and their memory. But that's the basis of how I got into it. And then from that day, I have read law, studied law. I have represented people in the High Court. I'm the only person as a lay person ever to take the British government to court in the European Court for Human Rights and won an injunction against them. And they wasn't very happy. They don't like me at all, right? Okay. So there's lots of situations where we've won the cases. There's one case that I lost in particular, which was a guy in the north of England called Steve Todd. They shut his gym down, but it wasn't because of what I did or what he did. It was because the judge was crooked. So when we take back the country, I've always said to Steve, let me tell you something, we don't leave anyone behind, right? We're coming back for you. And we're going to make sure that you get compensation for your gym, for everything that's happened to you. You're going to get compensation. And one part of that compensation is that judge is who perjured their oath, right? is sacked, and they could face trial, right, for what they've actually done in common law, the real common law. So I just want everyone to understand. Again, another guy, Charlie Staples, we're in the High Court now with a case against torture because he's one of our members, literally one of our members, and the police tortured him. They tried to stop him breathing, he's face down on the floor. All of that is going through the court process at the moment. Metropolitan Police, yet again, he actually went to trial because they said he assaulted them, which he didn't, assaulting an emergency worker. And just to give an indication of this, right, there is something called the Criminal Justice Act 1988, Section 134, torture. It was brought into effect in 1988, and it protects us from state torture, right? Now, torture isn't pulling someone's fingernails out and getting information. That's just one of the elements of torture. There are many others. But during COVID, some of the violence that was meted out by the police enforcing government policy is regarded as torture under international law and domestic law, which is really important. What's happened to them children all over the country, the rape and torture gangs, for example, that comes under the torture laws. And the British won't use it. Let me just say, we made an application. Charlie Staples went for a trial, and I wrote out his full defence. He represented himself in front of the jury. He got a unanimous not guilty, with 4 police officers giving evidence, and even the judge was against the police and said, "Why did you smash his head 4 times on the floor when he was handcuffed face down?" And the police officer said it was for his own safety, Your Honour. And the judge looked like he was going to punch him, right? And the jury started laughing. But let me just make sure I'm clear on this, right? Not one case, and there's including one of a 93-year-old man, right, in a wheelchair, in a care home, with dementia and one leg. Listen to this. The police tasered him, hit him with batons, and gassed him, right? And he never come out of hospital, right? 3 weeks later, he was dead. And they tried to sweep it under carpet. Them 2 police officers are now on trial in Southwark Crown Court in May, right? The point being, for a minor charge of ABH, actual bodily harm, right? They tried to get common assault. That case, and by the way, Section 6 of the Act is a mandatory life sentence if you're found guilty. If you're a police officer, a judge, a prime minister, think of Gordon Brown with them kids and the letter he sent out, they know that.
Yeah.
The point being, not one case has been brought for torture in this country when it should have done, and there's a reason for it, which I'll get to in a couple of seconds. But yet, when they brought in assaulting an emergency worker in 2018, right, assaulting an emergency worker, which was brought in for to protect the National Health Service, there's been 20,000 prosecutions.
Right.
With the police giving evidence against people saying he assaulted me or she assaulted me, right? So look at 18,000 prosecutions from 2018 to none since 1988. With all the deaths in custody, by the way, we're talking about 2,000 deaths in police custody, and no one's done. The only people doing anything are us, right? So there's lots of things that people need to know that they don't know, and you don't know what you don't know. So people are sitting there thinking everything's hunky dory when it's not.
Well, I think the saying that comes out of that very much is knowledge is power. And I think a very big indication of that is all those books on your shelves behind you. You know, you've got to learn, you've got to read, you've got to work it out. Otherwise, they're going to be all over you. And a lot of people fall for that, don't they? I mean, so some of the stories that you read every day, you think, is this necessary? Could these people have removed themselves from that situation they found themselves in? And again, it's submitting to the state, isn't it? Or what they believe to be the truth. Let's have a look at another few comments and then we'll talk elections. The Crown is a corporation of London controlled by liveries. That's Deborah Hart. Steve Chilton, Sabre London Docks. Yeah, he's making a right mess, isn't he? I haven't been into the city as a taxi driver since all of the new tolls have been instigated around the Isle of Dogs and everything. Raw power, people shouldn't have to learn about this from YouTube. No, that's right, they shouldn't. It should be taught in schools. I completely agree with you.
Well, by law, by law, they're supposed to be taught in schools. That's what the Acts of Union says.
Right. Well, there you go. The Church Shoulders Out. That's Paranormal Channel X. Squirrel Sniper. Labour have deleted the great in Great Britain. Thank God I'm English. I appreciate the sentiment there. Yeah. Particularly the English bit. Couple more. Men and women, not people. And Bowser Head Teacher, we need a comprehensive overhaul of the iniquitous establishment that has destroyed and obliterated our culture and history. I think the overhaul is we need to remove our country from it. That's the entire case. This one, we the people of England will take everything back. I actually believe we will. Now, let's talk about elections. Now, the fever that's rocking the country at the moment, obviously, is reform. Yes, absolutely. Now, everybody everywhere is very much pro-reform, and they're very much, what choice have we got? We're desperate. We're fed up with Labour. We're fed up with Conservatives. And I've had the experience in the last couple of days, which I've had before. Every time I make a video criticising reform in any way, shape or form, I get absolutely slammed because they think that's the solution. But you look at the pissed off Tories and everything else coming into reform and the way his political allegiance keeps doing this all the time, it's quite obvious to me that it's Uniparty 2.0. And for me saying that, I've probably lost another 50 subscribers. But, up at Runcorn and Helsby, where the election's going on, they're throwing everything at it, reform, and people like you, people probably don't even know that you're actually standing there in that parliamentary seat yourself, because you're considered a fringe party. Let's sweep him under the carpet like he doesn't exist and get one of the other lot in. If somebody looks at a form and thinks, I don't like anybody on here, like reform, what can they do? There's a lot of people that get pissed off and say, oh, I'm not going to bother voting. Now, in my mind, you're just consenting to them to doing whatever they like. So you've got to do something. Turn up at the polling station. You look at the list. I don't like what's on here. Well, what's the choice? What's the alternative, Graham?
The alternative is to write, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in our private chat here, so I don't know if someone in the background can put that link, because there's a video on there that I did. It's on the English Constitution Party's website, spoilt ballot versus abstention. So technically, there's no such thing as a spoilt ballot. Right. You can write on your ballot, and this is the cleanest, best way of doing it. You can write on the ballot, I do not consent. I also write on it, for example, Ashby versus White 1703. So you write across it, right? So I have got some images on here, how you would do it. Loads of people did it, lots and lots of people, but the more people that do it, the basic of the video that's on that link that I've put into the chat, into our chat on here, on what's it called? StreamYard, right?
That one.
People, that's the one. So what happens when people write, I do not consent? A lot of people don't know what happens at the count, right? So or they don't even know the process, which is one of the reasons why we like standing, because people understand and we take them to the count and they start to learn. So one of the things that happens is you get a writ sent out. The writ comes from the Crown, right? And once a writ has been issued, it goes to the returning officer, who is a Crown servant. So the head of the council is a Crown servant, is an acting returning officer, right? That's what they're doing. So his job is to record every single vote. And that's what's called the turnout. So the turnout is recorded. We've got low turnouts at the moment. What we really need is high turnouts, and we need people doing what I'm actually saying at the moment. You can bring the country, you can create a constitutional crisis, right? And there's a reason for it. So Ashby versus White 1703 was a ruling where a guy went along and he tried to vote, and one of the king's men or whatever stopped him from voting. There was an argument in Parliament. Parliament said it's our jurisdiction. He got banged up. It then went to the High Court, and the High Court said, you haven't got jurisdiction over this, right? Because this is about an individual's liberties and rights. So they heard the case, and eventually Sir John Holt, it went up to, and by the way, he was also the framer of the English Bill of Rights. So he definitely knew what he was talking about. But it ended up in the House of Lords, and it was a 10-2 majority for the person who was trying to vote and got restricted. And there was something like a 10-page ruling, but they never show it to you in full, right? And the reason they don't show it to you in full is because it is entrenched constitutional law. And in there, the judge talks about when you vote, it's about your consent. So if you write on the ballot, right, I do not consent, then you are putting it in writing. Instead of drawing silly drawings or saying, I've seen some really hysterical ballots, trust me. And this is the other thing that people don't realise. When you get to the end of the election, the returning officer pulls all the candidates together, and they look at every ballot that is not for a candidate, right? And they look through them. And the last one I was at, there was probably about 20 I do not consent. But out of all of the void ballots, the ones that they was looking at were the I do not consent, the I do not consent, the I do not consent, right? Now, so what you've got to imagine is if the I do not consent is higher than their proposed candidate, whoever it is, then that's an invalid election because the majority of people have voted I do not consent. At the end of every election, there is something that is available to us. Many people don't know this. It's called an election court. Right, it costs £5,000 to put an application into the court. It's an application fee, but it's a common law court, and it deals with election issues, and it's only open for a period, I think, of 6 weeks. So if anyone knows anything about history, I'll give you an example. The Great Fire of London, 1666. They created a special court. It was called the Fire Courts, and it dealt with the aftermath of the Great Fire. Right? Because they needed a way and specialist expertise with dealing with all these people who'd lost their entire livelihoods, right? So again, at the end of an election, because it's so important, you have something called an election court, and they will listen. That judge listens. I've read lots of judgments from them courts, and they are genuine. Some of the judges I've seen, very, very, very good judgments on it, and you then bring a case, or we would bring the case if it was I do not consent. You don't want a British barrister or a British solicitor. You need people who really understand the Constitution to present the case for the people. What that does is creates an issue where you will be showing the people that the Crown, because the Crown has to be told, the people do not consent, right? Parliament has to be told, and they cannot put that member of Parliament that had a few votes when you've got the highest level of I do not consent. It's one of the reasons why Tony Blair rejected, when he was in government, none of the above, because they knew there was going to come a time where people would ballot none of the above, right? So because they never give us the option on the ballot box, your option is to write it across the ballot. I do not consent, Ashby versus White, 1703. It is is counted and is also inspected at the end of the election in front of all the candidates. So everyone knows that you've said, I do not consent to this, right? And again, if you fill out the ballot and you're in the ballot box, you're allowed to take a picture of it and send it out on social media, because it shows people this is how many I do not consent there are, right? And as it goes out there, you will realise that you create a constitutional crisis. What does it mean when the majority of people say I do not consent? It means they cannot tax you. You don't have to obey their laws, right? Because they can only enforce laws by consent. And if you're saying I do not consent and you've put it in writing on a ballot, they can't tax you, they can't make new laws, and if a specific area does it, say the whole of Norfolk did it, right? Norfolk would take back Norfolk. And then they would create their own people, their own management systems, and say, right, that's it. And then all of a sudden you get contagion, which is why they attacked us, working class people, at Peterloo in Manchester, Petersfield in Manchester, 1819. They killed 18 of us, men, women, and a baby, right? And injured 700 out of the 70,000 protesters. Why did they do that? Because in Spitalfields Market and in Birmingham, the working people had come together and said, we're not paying any tax, right? And we're demanding a vote, because at that time, working people didn't have the vote. So they attacked us in Peterloo. And again, it was a massive stain on the character of the British, again, right? Attacking the English working class. And I can emphasize to this, there were, as far as my knowledge goes, there was no blacks in that crowd, right? It was the English white working class that was attacked by the British on the orders of the King, the Prime Minister, and here's the kicker, the magistrate. The magistrate was controlling the yeomanry, right? And the yeomanry are not militia, right? They're associated with the state. And the order was given to attack. And they knew the crowd was unarmed, right? So when people understand the history of this, nothing's changed for us. And the only way you're going to change it is if you write, I do not consent, because otherwise you're dishonouring everyone who died for us and our vote, including them people at Peterloo, right? Petersfield in Manchester, and including a baby. They died so you can have the vote. They protested so you can have the vote. And then people turn around and say, I'm not voting, and all this nonsense. They're basically communists, because what they wanted to do was demoralise the population. And as they demoralise, less and less people vote, right? Because they don't know there is a way of coming back. And it is, I do not consent. And England is unique in having that. No other country in the world has that option.
No. So, with that in mind, Runcorn and Helsby, you're standing. How's it going? What do you hope to achieve? How does it sound on the ground up there? What's the game plan? What do you think's gonna happen?
Well, we've been invited to Hustings this Thursday, so I'm back up there Tuesday, and then I'm going to be staying right the way through until the count, and leafleting, etc. So on Wednesday, we're at a particular pub. I'd have to bring it up, but it'll be on my show tomorrow night anyway. We'll be at a pub for St George's Day. So there's a few people turning up to that. That's just to have a beer and say thank you to everyone, etc., for really helping us out. We had a day of action on the 12th, where the police started sending emails saying, we demand to know what you're doing, where you're going to be, what time's it's going to be, how many people are going to be there. I sent them an email back and said, this is a political campaign. It's none of your business. And have you said the same thing to Reform and the Labour Party and the Conservative Party? I don't think you have. So therefore, you are harassing a campaigner who's trying to get elected. So the police are against us, even though we're the good guys, right? We believe in the rule of law, unlike most of these people out there. So when we did the day of action, which was outside of, and again, all them videos are out there. They're on my Twitter account. They're on my Rumble account. we had a fantastic response from locals driving past, bibbing. We've got all our big banners out. We've got the English flag out. We're explaining to people we're about retirees who've been stitched up. We're about the disabled people who have been stitched up. And I want to say to everyone listening to this, right? One thing that never, ever loses its strength. It's as strong as a 98-year-old as you being a 98-year-old as when you was 18, and that's the power of your vote, right? So as you become weaker, your vote is just as strong as when you was 18. You must use it, and you must vote for someone who's going to stand up and protect you, right? And this is especially true of the women that were stitched up by the state, that paid all their money into them pensions and then had their pension date moved from 60, right, to 67. Disgusting. Right? Yeah. They lied to people. Well, again, my wife is struggling. My ex-wife, I should say, is struggling now. Right? She's tired. She's worked all her life. I feel sorry for her, but she's always trusted the system. I said, I always told you, but what are you doing trusting the system? You should never trust the government. If they say they're going to give you cradle to the grave, you know at the end of it, when it starts being expected, they'll stick one in you rather than have to pay you out. Right? Because that is a socialist system. So again, we're standing for all them people. We're English. We love animals, right? So all of these things that are going on in the background, just to give you an example, because of my knowledge of what the state did to me and stitching me up, Lucy Letby, and what happened with her. I mean, that hospital, the Chester Hospital, is within the catchment area of Runcorn. So she'd have a voice in Parliament speaking out for her. And I'll be standing there saying, listen, I know what the state does. I've seen it. And what they did to that young girl is outrageous. But if I had been the judge, that case would never have been put to a jury, right? Because I would have seen there is no evidence here against her. Let me get rid of this thing. So that's one of the things. The other thing in Runcorn, again, we've got lots of support, but there's things that people don't know, right? So the bridge that you have to pay £2.50 for, the same as the Dartford Bridge and the Queen Elizabeth Bridge that goes over the River Thames. All of that money now goes to a Spanish company, the same as the bridge in Runcorn. Right, the same as the link road or the link tunnel under the Mersey. A Spanish company owns it. We never left the European Union. They're bleeding us dry, right? And then now what they're doing is in Runcorn, they're creating this carbon capture thing that's costing millions, right? And I've looked at it and said, what's all this nonsense about carbon capture? They're called trees, right? And they create oxygen, right? So but we're having this conversation, and then I said, do you understand that carbon capture company, that corporation, is Spanish? The same as the ones that are taking all their money with the tolls. Yeah. And then people are saying to me, no, I didn't know that, right? And I said, listen, when I talk to people in Runcorn and Helsby, they're like listening to me. And I said, listen, right, I'm one of you. I'm not one of them. I'm one of you. I'll be the only Englishman ever elected to the British Parliament for 70 to 80 years. Of course, I'm going to represent you. We've got a whole team behind us. So if you elect me, you don't just get me. You get the hundreds of people behind me who are working for you, right? Because we need to make a massive impression. So people say, hang on a minute. We want these English people in that Parliament. Because now we're being heard. Englishmen are being heard. So the way the campaign is going is fantastic. But I must tell people, I mean, so far we do it on donations and membership fees, etc. But we've spent in the region. I mean, I don't know exactly because I don't need to add it up yet. I've got the paperwork for it here. But we spent about £3,000. It's a shoestring, right? We don't get no one gives, apart from real alternative media like your channel, like you, right? That's real. If the other people that call themselves alternative media won't even listen to the argument about step outside of the British box and go back to being a Commonwealth. That's all we're asking. Self-determination back to a Commonwealth, right? But let me make sure I'm clear in saying this, right? All of the political parties, what we call the uni parties, do you know how much they're allowed to spend on this by-election?
Go on.
£880,000. 180 grand compared to disabled people, right? Disabled people, retirees, working people without a pot to beep in, right? Who have donated to us. And then you've got these people saying, don't vote, right? I mean, I'm talking about disabled people that have put money in for our deposit. You have to pay a deposit of 500 quid before you even start, right? And I'd at least expect for people to go out and vote so we can get our deposit money back, right? Otherwise, you're slapping the disabled people and the retirees that have all been stitched up by this, particularly by the Labour Party. And let me just say this to you. I am passionate, but I would never beat up a Runcorn and Helsby constituent like the last Labour candidate did, right? And an elected member of Parliament. And let me tell you something. He done 2 days in prison and a special appeal on the hurry up, and they let him out.
Yeah,
really? It's disgusting.
And there's a video that's been circulated recently of Keir Starmer, where he's been boasting about how many people he's banged up for simply giving their opinion online. And then you think about someone who likes punching their own constituents. It's ridiculous.
Again, I mean, I can tell you stories. I know Nigel Farage, by the way, from UKIP. I mean, it was the only political party I ever joined. I've got his mobile number on this phone. Right. I can tell you now, he is a 100% narcissistic person. Right. He's what's known as dark personality. He could have got us out of the European Union and the British Union in 2014. Instead, he did the reverse. Right. So someone pretending to want to get us out of the European Union. What was it? It was the referendum that Scotland had, right? And by the way, and I want everyone to understand this, right? England is the only nation out of the constituent nations that has never had a referendum on independence because they know what the answer will be, right?
Yeah.
And they're gone, right? The British are gone, the bureaucracy's gone. We would go back to distributed governance, exactly the model of the United States of America. But let me just say this to you. Nigel Farage went out to Scotland and sought to persuade them to stay, right? Now, if you want out of the European Union, he put the British Union in front of getting out of the European Union. And we then stayed in it for another couple of years. It then went pear-shaped with this, we left with a deal and all that nonsense, right? Now, he is the person that is now responsible for your children that are about to be conscripted with the European Defence Union into the European Army, where they have got control over the English, right, military assets, and your children and your grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And Nigel Farage could have stopped that, right? And all what would have happened, the only issue would have been, we would have been going back to being a Commonwealth. We govern ourselves. What's wrong with that? It's called self-determination, the #1 human right.
And I guess it would be as simple as go up to Scotland, convince them that their independence is a good thing. Off they go. Union gone. We're out of the EU. Job done. Thank you very much.
That's it. And people don't realise we would have been out, no deal. The English would have been governing themselves. The Scots would have been governing themselves. Scotland's already a region of the European Union, and they don't even realise it. They've been conned by the SNP. I've tried to speak to Alba. Again, I've had conversations previously with the recently deceased Alec Salmon. I'm not going to say anything about that, but I'm highly suspicious about what happened to him.
Yeah.
I believe he was genuine. And anyone who has been even tutoring, I'll give you an example, and this is just an example. Keir Hardie, right, who was the founder of the Labour Party and happened to be Scottish, he wanted independence for Scotland, and he hated immigrants and immigration. That was the founding member of the Labour Party, right?
Right.
Now Keir Starmer, right, is named after him. So you think to yourself, surely someone's got to turn around and say, yeah, listen, working people don't want this because it affects us more than anywhere else. The elites or the ruling class, they're all getting their benefits because they're removing the jobs and put them in China and put them in different countries. They've shut down. Listen, if England run England again, let me just say this to everyone listening. I want you to remember this, right? We would reopen our coal industry and give the communities the north and the south because we had coal mines shut as well, right? We would reopen our coal industry. We would rebuild our shipbuilding industry. We will reignite our steel industries, right? And we would go back to a situation where everybody would have the dignity of a job, right? And one of the things that we would do, we would shut down the central banking system as it is today. And there is a way of doing it. Trump is quite right. You do not need to have taxes. You just need to have an economy and people that are working and employed. And once they are, your economy and access to your economy is worth money to other people, right? You don't take liberties with them, right? But they have to pay. And the reason that you have tariffs is to protect your own workers, your own businesses, right? Because you don't want to be reliant on another country. You need to make your own steel. If you can't make your own steel, you can't make weapons that defend your country. No, it's obvious when you think about everything that's going on. So just to make sure everyone knows that, and don't forget, everyone who's listening, this is going to be crucially important for Runcorn. Just send this. Make sure you share this video because my voice doesn't get that. I get shut down by the BBC. They won't even have our logo on their website, right? Because it's got a cross on it, a Christian cross on it, right? They will not use the word England or English. But the people of England, like the 2011 census, 32.4 million of us, for the first time only, they put that on there. And once people knew, then they started targeting the areas with the highest English and flooded it with what they call asylum seekers. Nonsense. What they needed was more British, right? Because they didn't know the history of England. So all we're saying is, if you want to take it back, you need to share this video. So if you find it interesting, nothing I say to you ever is always from the archives. It's always from our history. And our history, our ancestors wrote down what was happening. And what's happening now is exactly what happened in 1688, right? You change the names of the people, but what's going on is exactly the same. So don't forget to share it. And while you're watching this, share it again. I mean, when I had my channel before they took it down, they've took me down off of Twitter. They've took me down. I mean, I'm back on Twitter now. Even Elon Musk took me down. And all I talk about is self-determination. They took me off of Twitter. They took me off of Facebook. My voice print, even on Facebook. They'll throttle the video, right? YouTube do the same. And the reason is because I tell you the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So help me God. That's it. I took an oath to run this party. I took an oath to England and to support England. And my allegiance is to the people of England and our ancestors. So to all them people listening to this, I want you to remember one thing, right? We were given the eternal flame of freedom to hand on by our ancestors to the future generations. Do not be the generation that extinguished the eternal flame of freedom. you need to stand up for England, right? You need to say you are English. And even if you are brown or black, right, you need to be culturally English and stand up for us, because we are the ones who have given you the lifestyle that your ancestors came here for. We, the English, freed blacks, not the British, right? Wilberforce was a great guy, but 20 consecutive years it took him to pass the Abolition Act. We'd already outlawed it because you cannot be a slave in England. That was the ruling. Somerset versus Stuart, 1772. Go and read it, and you'll understand that what I tell you is the truth, and what the British tell you is propaganda, because we live in Soviet Britain, and they will shut down any of this conversation. So you need to share it as much as possible, so the people in Runcorn and Helsby know you need to be that eternal flame and carry that flame into Runcorn and Helsby, so the people there know that they've got someone to vote for. And we're targeting the people who don't vote, right? These people in a mindset of uni party and reform are no good to no one. And especially when their candidate is a magistrate who has been a nodding dog to the system for 20 years, right? Yeah. I know that system. I know how it damaged me. I know how it damaged my family. And I know how it's damaged many other people that are behind a door and they shouldn't be.
Absolutely. What I want to do now, Graham, just to finish off, is just rattle off some of the comments, some last words from you, and then we'll call it a day. Tony, sorry for being obtuse, but I've never heard of this party before. Surely they should have a bigger platform. What do you say to that?
Well, the direct answer is we've now got 2 websites. Our websites are attacked. Someone put our party on Wikipedia. Someone took it down off of Wikipedia during this campaign. They attack us, and especially the left. And by the way, fascism and communism are both on the left, right? Never forget that. They are both authoritarian. We do not believe as English men and women in authoritarian regimes at all, right? So again, they won't allow us to get our message out. And that's why we rely on alternative media like yourself, Andy, because you're just a normal working geezer like me, right? I mean, I used to drive a minicab, right? When I was unemployed, I'd drive a minicab, right? Because it was employment, it is honest work, right? Mm-hmm. And again, the more people out there that start realizing they have vilified the English flag, right? They've reversed they call it projection, and they've blamed onto the English what the British have done in the world, right? The English have done, listen, we exported the English language all around the world, and especially to America, right? We exported the English common law. We exported the Commonwealth. We exported liberty and freedom, right? When the blacks wanted to be free that was enslaved, where did they come to? They come to England, right? They fought to get to England because they knew when they touched our soil, they would be free. It wasn't because of the British and Britain. So people need to understand that. What was it? Any more questions?
Yeah, a few more. What is our remedy to take us back to the English construction, Andy? Well, the English Constitution. Avoid the Acts of Union. It's pretty simple. Richie ST, if Parliament is not protecting our borders and working against its people, then the King should immediately dissolve this rotten government and call a general election. Does he still have the power to do so?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And he has perjured his oath and he's technically abdicated. He took 2 oaths, not just one. He took the accession oath and he took the coronation oath act, which was a solemn oath to God, and it was to protect and to promote the gospel. And our Constitution protects the Protestant religion because we've already been persecuted in the past.
Right. Maria, There will be no accountability unless we void the acts of union. The British Uniparty will never arrest themselves.
Exactly. Exactly.
Rat Kappa, Andy, the English Constitution may hold the key to our future. Your insights are vital. Engage. Oh, I'm engaging, don't you worry.
Well done.
Richie ST. Waffle, 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 waffle. What are you English going to do to stop this?
Yeah, well, the answer to that is we have still got the right to keep and bear arms, and we have still got the right to full-on rebellion. There are processes, and two of the processes have already taken place. So people need to be engaged with the Constitution to understand what their lawful position is.
Dodger Bow, listen to Patriot Street Fighter in Texas. He's up all in this, and how the Khazarian mafia infiltrated all the positions of power. I've seen, Wurzel Gummidge on a few of my feeds. I love that picture. Tony Tasker. Excuse me, everyone. My kids will never fight for this parliament, especially if they want to send them to the Ukraine. Yeah, I'm with you there. I've got 2 kids over my dead body, basically. Maria Ingram, to those who defend the British system, ask the children if they think the British Uniparty needs to be arrested. Certainly needs to be pulled to pieces. What we got here? John Platt gifted 1 Andy the Cabby membership. Thank you very much, John. Gary, definitely many Western countries are on the brink. I think.
Well, I believe we're already in a civil war. It's just not kinetic yet.
Yeah. There's enough tension, should we call it? Survivor, how does one wrestle power from the state when the state holds a monopoly on force?
That's a very good question, and one that I couldn't answer on this show without Andy's YouTube channel being taken down. But what I have explained to people in seminars, and they absolutely get it, to people, there is a lawful way of doing it.
Well, we'll make people aware of where they can find you at the end of this. Maria Ingram, the British have been born into the beast system. They cannot see beyond it. The English want no part of the beast system that ruins our children's lives. That's what it's all about in my mind. Our kids. I mean, I've got 21-year-old and 11-year-old sons. And is it down to us to sort it out, or are we going to leave the mess for them? It's one of those. Can this be a weekly show? Well, I'm on here every Sunday anyway, in the garage, and I'm certainly quite happy to have Graham back if he's happy to come back. No problem. Blue Angel 10. This man understands the people. This is fabulous. Someone said you're miles better than Nigel Farage. Jean Mark.
I'm grateful.
Why was British steel sold to China in the first place? That's a good question.
If you want an answer to that, is because they have always sought, and they have sought for the last 80 years. We didn't win World War II. We lost it. And the real enemy was the Soviet Union and the Bolsheviks, right? And once people understand the reasoning behind it and what happened and how we've been infiltrated, their objective was always to deindustrialize us. And what you'll see is most of that going to China, right? And behind the President Xi and the communist bench, you will see big photographs of Karl Marx, who hated England.
Yeah, seen that. Okay, the last comment. Where can I get a full copy of our Constitution? That's from Clive.
That because we've got a history of 1100 years, and we have what's known as a common law constitution, right? What does that mean? It means it can be adjusted by the King's Bench when it's needed, right? And that's better. It's better to be. I believe it's better to have a common law jurisdiction. But I don't know if people can see that on the screen. That's got most of our constitutional statutes in it, many of which come from a constitutional parliament. So Helsby's statutes, this one is 4th edition, volume 10, and it actually says on the front, so anyone who says we haven't got a written constitution should say, why is there a big book then that judges have in the High Court that says volume 10 constitutional law if we haven't got a written constitution? And then some people say, well, it isn't codified. Well, some parts are not codified, but that's not really relevant because the large part of it is codified. There are elements, the Magna Carta is codified, the English Bill of Rights is codified. There's a reason why it's codified, and it says all and singular in the English Bill of Rights. And again, it's forever. It can never be removed. They are your inalienable rights, and that includes the right to keep and bear arms. And so if you want to know one book you can try and get, it is that one, and you can literally read through it. I mean, I won't go through any of that now, but again, once people understand that all of these laws are ours, and anyone who says, if anyone says to you that a statute isn't law, you automatically know that they're talking out of their backside, because charters, right? What a charter was, and what the Great Charter was, and what the Charter of Liberties was, and the Charter of the Forest was, they was a smaller franchise, but it's always king in council, right? So the king in council created a charter. The charter is really a statute. That's what it is, right? And the reason they started to call them statutes was because in 1275, under our history, was the first Parliament, which was the first statute of Westminster. By the way, we was the first people in that law that actually gave women rights, and it was the right not to be raped. It would become a criminal offence to ravish a woman, right? And we was the first people just to actually make laws to protect women. People need to understand that the first statute of Westminster was a charter, but because it was a parliament, right, it widened the franchise. So it wasn't just the king's barons and the king that was making law. It widened the franchise. And as the franchise widened, they then didn't call them statutes anymore. They didn't call them charters anymore. They called them statutes. So they're one in the same thing, but you can never repeal the Great Charter. You can never repeal the Charter of Liberties or the Charter of the Forest. By the way, they're all in that book, and it tells you that. It tells you that you cannot repeal it, right? So anyone, and again, the judges, the barristers, the KCs, they're not trained. Whereas I've been studying this and looking at it and reading law reports. I mean, I sound really boring, but I used to sit there reading law reports and looking at cases and how the judge had decided them. And again, I've done that for a very long time.
Okay, I hope that answered that question, Clive. We've come to the end. We've gone a bit longer than usual, but that's all good. It's been a great conversation with Graham, and I hope everyone's got a lot from this and learnt a lot from this. Anyone I have on, I always like to give you last words, not last rites or anything like that, last words. Is there anything you want to finish off with, like where people can find you on social media, Rumble and everything, or anything you want to comment?
Well, you can find me on Twitter, or X as they now call it, under English Exit, right? At English Exit. You can find me on Rumble, which is the only place that's not taken me down, and that's the full English show. So you can search in Rumble, come and join us, because that is where my gloves come off and I speak openly, right? Very openly, without saying, because I have to be very careful, not because of Andy, but because of YouTube, right? So again, people need to understand that Andy believes in free speech and actually believes that alternative views should be shared, right? And that's why I'm on the channel tonight. And the other thing that I would say is on the 26th of April, you can find the details on our website. On the 26th of April, we're going to be doing another action day in Frodsham, I think it's called. Again, let me just make sure I can bring it up on the. I'll try and bring it up and paste this out there. Make sure everyone can understand where it is. And there's a pub there by the traffic lights called the Bear's Paw. So on the 26th of April, we are going to be there with an action day with all our English flags, with our boards, our banners. We're going to be handing out leaflets, and we need as many people to help us as possible. If you're disabled, if you're retired, you know, and wherever you are in the country, if you want to come there, we need to show these people there is support for England and the English, and we need an English member of Parliament. And again, that would be fantastic. I will put that in your personal chat again, just so people can come and pick it up if they need to pick it up. But let me see if I can put that in there now. And that's it. And the only other thing I will say to you, to everyone listening to this, is our strapline. It's on everything that we do. The Constitution is the solution. And it's because I understand it, I know it is the solution. They've taken it from you. You need to claim it back. It's as simple as that. Because them rights are there forever. They've tried to hide them from you. And I'm trying to tell you, you do have rights. The British have rules. The English have rights.
Brilliant. Thanks, Graham. Thank you very much. I hope everybody has really enjoyed this evening. I certainly have. I mean, I've taken a deep dive into all of this myself, and my God, is all I can say. You know, it's a case of what you believe to be true and what actually is true. There's a very big space in between, and people need to learn. People need to look at this stuff. It's really vital, if not for us, for future generations. It's something to behold. It really is. You can find Graham on X. You can find Graham on Rumble. As he said, he's standing in that election on the 1st of May. And because he is saying the things he's saying, he's not going to get any exposure off the mainstream media, because they're all very much bought, paid for, uniparty-esque. So he'll be swept under the rug, and it's down to me and others to try and help get a bit of exposure. He's done a few interviews, which you can find online. Just quite simply type his name in, and they do come up quite up there. So thank you. Two last things. Can I ask everybody hits the like button on this? That's very important, because the YouTube algorithm pings it around everywhere then. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And also share. I can't emphasize that enough. If you're on any social media, please get this shared. Get your friends to share it. Get them to share it with their friends, and so on and so on. Let's try and make as big a noise as possible. And if you're in that area and are eligible to vote on May the 1st, you know, with Graham on the actual paper, then please consider it. Thanks again. More content out during the week. And as always, I look forward to talking to you soon. Toodaloo.